Dear students, in my last video I have solved as many as 3 problems connected to final accounts of non-trading concerns. I am Dr. Panduranga Nayak, Principal SVS College Bantwal, and this is the 8th video. See, while preparing the final accounts of non-trading concerns, we must be very clear about whether the expenditure is capital or revenue. Similarly, receipt, whether it is capital or revenue. So clear distinction between the two you have to make, otherwise you cannot prepare the final accounts properly. So to get better insight as to whether the expenditure is capital or revenue, or whether the receipt is capital or revenue, I am going to solve some problems. Further problem, already have solved 1 or 2 problems. Now we'll go ahead with some more problems. So let me take up problem number 4. How will you deal with the following cases? How do you treat that? Legal charges incurred in connection with purchase of lands. See, any expenses incurred in connection with purchase of any asset, that is to be taken as capital expenditure. Here legal charges are incurred for purchasing an asset, and therefore that is a capital expenditure. That is a capital expenditure, and that should be added to land on the asset side of the balance sheet. It should be shown in the balance sheet in the form of addition to land. So it will not be entered in the income and expenditure account. Ordinary legal charges are debited to income and expenditure account, whereas here it's relating to purchase of an asset, so it should be added to the asset only in the balance sheet. Brokerage paid for raising a loan for purpose of business. See, these are not ordinary. This is not an ordinary expense. So this is to raise a loan, and therefore that is capital in nature. So that will not be debited to income and expenditure account. Therefore it will be taken on the liability side of the balance sheet in the form of addition to loan. Then carriage paid on newly acquired machinery. So it is to bring the asset into the business, again relating to asset purchased, and therefore that is capital in nature. It should be added to machinery account and shown on the asset side of the balance sheet. It is not debited to income and expenditure account because that is not recurring in nature. You don't purchase the machinery very often unless you are a dealer in machinery. If you are a dealer in machinery, carriage paid on any machinery, that is taken as revenue expenditure. But here, unless otherwise specified, you are not considered to be a dealer in machinery. It's an asset. So carriage paid on machinery acquired is a capital expenditure, should be added to the machinery only. Expenses incurred for whitewashing the building. So this is to maintain the asset, that is building, and therefore that is recurring in nature, revenue expenditure debited to income and expenditure account. Wages paid for workmen engaged in construction of building. Any wages paid for construction of the building, that is in the nature of capital expenditure. Once the building is constructed and ordinary wages in the day-to-day functioning of the business, that is taken as revenue expenditure. But here it is capital expenditure, expenses in order to construct the building. It is part of building, so it is a capital expenditure added to building account, and it will be shown on the asset side of the balance sheet. Amount spent on repairs to a second-hand motor car before it is used. See, repair to any motor car, that is a maintenance expense. That is an ordinary item or recurring in nature. It is for maintenance of the asset. But here, one useless second-hand asset, it is converted into usable condition, and it is made to function, and it will enhance the earning capacity of the asset, and therefore that is taken as capital expenditure. Similarly, expenses incurred for erecting a new machine. These are also considered to be capital expenditure, just like wages paid for erecting a new machine or installation of new machine. That is part of an asset. It is added to machinery account, and it will be shown on the asset side of the balance sheet. It's not debited to income and expenditure account. If it is ordinary wages or ordinary expenses, then that will be debited to income and expenditure account. Brokerage paid for the purpose of purchasing shares, so it's a type of investment, and therefore it is capital in nature, added to investment account actually, and that is shown on the liability side of the balance sheet. It's not a revenue item, it's a capital expenditure. Periodical repairs and replacement of plant, so this is revenue in nature, so debited to income and expenditure account. Cost of maps purchased by a college, so here maps you don't purchase very often, so it's an asset. So cost of maps purchased by a college, it's a capital expenditure shown on the asset side of the balance sheet. Purchase of patents, it's an asset purchase, should be shown on the asset side of the balance sheet. Don't debit it to income and expenditure account. Fees paid for the renewal of patent rights, this is an item of recurring nature. Renewal, every year you have to pay it. In other words, it is annual feature, therefore it is a revenue expenditure debited to profit and loss account. Structural alterations to building, so it is a capital expenditure unless otherwise specified, so that is taken as addition to buildings, so capitalized, capital expenditure. Okay, look at the treatment once again. I have shown here in the form of solution. Legal charges incurred in connection with the purchase of land are capital expenditure incurred for acquiring fixed assets added to land account. Brokerage paid for raising a loan for the purpose of business is a capital expenditure. It is incurred for raising capital for the business added to loan account. Carriage paid on newly acquired machinery is capital expenditure. It's an expense incurred for purchase of an asset, and therefore it is added to machinery account. Expenses incurred for whitewashing building, that is recurring in nature, and therefore revenue debited to income and expenditure account. Wages paid to workmen engaged in the construction of building, that is part of building, therefore it's an asset. It is shown on the asset side of the balance sheet. Amount spent on repairs to a second-hand motor car before it is used is a capital expenditure, because that will enhance the revenue earning capacity of the asset. So it is debited to motor car account and not debited to income and expenditure account. Expenses incurred for erecting a new machine or installing a new machine, that is capital in nature and therefore added to asset account. Brokerage paid for the purchase of shares, that is it's a type of investment and it's a capital expenditure added to investment account. Periodical repairs and replacement of plant, revenue expenditure incurred for maintaining the plant in a working condition, and it does not increase the revenue earning capacity of the plant. Cost of maps purchased by a college is a capital expenditure incurred for acquiring a fixed asset. Purchase of patents, capital expenditure. Fees paid for the renewal of the patent rights, revenue expenditure incurred regularly. Structural alteration to a building is a capital expenditure as it increases the earning capacity of the asset and added to asset account. We'll take up one more problem. How will you deal with the following items? How do you treat life membership fees received? It is a capital receipt. These are capital receipts and therefore they are added to capital fund on the liability side of the balance sheet. It's an addition to capital fund on the liability side of the balance sheet because it is received once in a way, not recurring in nature. So capital receipts. Sale proceeds of old tennis balls. These are revenue in nature because tennis balls, they don't have long life. Very often you have to purchase and sell, and therefore that is treated as revenue receipt. So it is credited to income and expenditure account. Sale proceeds of old billiards table. This is a capital receipt because billiards table, they have got long life. So once they have become old, you are selling that. So therefore that is taken as capital receipt. Of course, any profit or loss on sale of billiard tables, that will be taken to income and expenditure account. If there is profit, income and expenditure account will be credited. If there is a loss, it will be debited to income and expenditure account. But sale proceeds are taken as capital receipts. Prize amount of 2 lakh received from Karnataka lottery, state lottery. It is a capital receipt. You don't win the lottery very often. Therefore, it is a capital receipt. Therefore, it is added to capital fund on the liability side of the balance sheet. Legacies received. Legacies means a kind of donation or gift received from a deceased member, a deceased person on his death. After his death, you are entitled to receive that amount, and they are called legacies. This is also an item of capital in nature, and therefore that is added to capital fund on the liability side of the balance sheet. It's not a revenue receipt. Special subscription received for the forthcoming party to the governor. So this is received for a specific purpose in order to give party to the governor, and therefore it is capital in nature. So it is added to a special fund created and shown on the liability side of the balance sheet. Scholarship granted to students out of funds provided by the government. So this is provided from the special fund provided by the government, and therefore that is taken as revenue expenditure. So prize fund might be created from out of the funds provided by the government, and from that special fund scholarships are granted, that will be deducted. The laboratory expenses incurred by this science laboratory of a science department of a college. So that is a recurring item of recurring nature. It's a regular feature. So that is taken as revenue expenditure. Cost of installing lights and fans already are learned. That is a capital expenditure, and therefore that is taken as part of asset. That will be shown on the asset side, and it will be added to fixtures, fittings and fixtures. Prizes awarded to students on the college day, if it is from prize fund, that will be deducted from prize fund, special fund on the liability side of the balance sheet as a deduction. If it is an ordinary item without any prize fund, then that will be debited to profit and loss, income and expenditure account. So if it is from special fund, for example prize fund, then it will be deducted from prize fund on the liability side of the balance sheet. If it is an ordinary item without having prize fund, then that will be debited to income and expenditure account. Match expenses met out of a match fund. It is from special fund or related to special fund, that will be deducted from match fund on the liability side of the balance sheet. In the absence of match fund, that will be debited to profit, income and expenditure account. Interest on match fund investment, that is the income from relating to match fund. So match fund is created, and the amount accumulated thereon will be invested, and income earned from the investment, that will be added to the prize fund only, or special fund only, that is match fund. So any income generated from the investment of match fund, that will be added to match fund only, that will not be credited to income and expenditure account. Donations received for constructing a swimming pool. Donations received for constructing a swimming pool. So that is for a particular purpose. So it's a special donation, and therefore special fund is created. To that it is being added. So not credited to income and expenditure account. Honorarium paid to the secretary of an association, recurring in nature, revenue expenditure, and therefore it is debited to income and expenditure account. Carriage paid on the goods purchased. You know very well, goods are purchased very often and they are meant for resale, and therefore that is taken as revenue expenditure. So I completed the problem. Once again, let us see the solution here, which I have given. Life membership is, it's a capital receipt, non-recurring in nature, added to capital fund on the liability side of the balance sheet. Sale proceeds of old tennis balls, revenue in nature as they are non-recurring in nature. I'm sorry, that should be recurring in nature, not non-recurring, recurring in nature, and therefore it should be credited to income and expenditure account. It should be recurring it is recurring in nature. Sorry, please make a note here. It's wrongly printed here, wrongly typed, and therefore it should be taken as recurring in nature. Sale proceeds of old billiards tables are capital receipts as they are the sale proceeds of a fixed asset. The book value of billiard table should be deducted from total value of billiards table on the asset side of the balance sheet, not the selling price. And any profit or loss on sale of billiards table will be entered on the income and expenditure account. I have told you already, either debited or credited to income and expenditure account, whether it is a loss or income. If it is loss, debit. If it is gain or profit, credit. Prize amount of rupees 2 lakh received from the Karnataka State Lottery is a capital receipt as it is not of recurring nature. It's added to capital fund on the liability side of the balance sheet. Legacies received are capital receipts as it is not of recurring nature. They should be added to capital fund on the liability side of the balance sheet. Special subscriptions received for the forthcoming party to the governor or subscriptions for a special purpose, they should appear on the liability side of the balance sheet as addition. Scholarship granted to students are out of funds provided by the government or expenses connected with special fund. Therefore, they should be deducted from special fund, scholarship fund on the liability side of the balance sheet. Laboratory expenses incurred by the science department of a college are revenue expenditure as they are recurring in nature and therefore debited to income and expenditure account. Cost of installing lights and fans, capital expenditure, already I told you about this. Prizes awarded to students on the college day should be taken as revenue expenditure and entered on the debit side of income and expenditure account if there is no special fund. If there is special fund, prize fund should be deducted from prize fund on the liability side of the balance sheet. Match expenses met out of match fund should be deducted from match fund on the liability side of the balance sheet. Interest on match fund investments should be added to the match fund only on the liability side of the balance sheet. Donations received for constructing a swimming pool or special donations for a specific purpose, they should be entered on the liability side of the balance sheet separately. Honorarium paid to the secretary of the association, revenue in nature, revenue expenditure entered on the debit side of the balance sheet. Carriage paid on goods purchased is revenue expenditure because goods are purchased very often and they are meant for resale, and therefore that is taken as revenue expenditure debited to income and expenditure account. So thus, if it is revenue expenditure, debited to the income and expenditure account. If it is revenue receipt, credited to the income and expenditure account. If it is a capital expenditure, well, it should be taken as an addition to the asset on the asset side of the balance sheet. Then if it is capital receipt, either it is shown as a liability, for example, donations towards prize fund, that will be added to the prize fund on the liability side of the balance sheet. On the other hand, sometimes if any asset is sold, it will be shown as a deduction, capital receipt, but it is shown as deducted from the concerned asset at book value. And profit and loss on that will be adjusted in the income and expenditure account. Carriage paid on goods purchased is revenue expenditure and it is debited in the income and expenditure account. Yes, by this completed this problem. Thank you.